Stop-motion animation is almost a lost art today. But there was a time when this painstaking, incredibly detailed approach to filmmaking brought some of the most impossible creations to the big screen in ways never seen before. And there's no bigger name in the history of stop motion than Ray Harryhausen. Over the course of 16 feature films and 9 shorts, Harryhausen became a legend of film thanks to his incredible work in 3D stop-motion animation. From his tutelage under stop-motion pioneer and King Kong co-creator Willis O'Brien to his final epic Clash of the Titans, Harryhausen created fantastical beasts that inspired generations of filmmakers that followed. You may be familiar with some of his most famous creations: Mighty Joe Young, Medusa, the Skeleton Army, the Kraken. These and so many more capture a sort of childhood wonder thanks to their handcrafted, highly personal expressions of what was often just one man making something beautiful, dangerous, and sometimes scary come to life in what I truly think is the perfect encapsulation of movie magic. And while it's been more than 40 years since Harryhausen last brought his creations to life on screen, they still live with us in our imagination today. So come with me as we explore the life and creations of Ray Harryhausen, the original King of the Monsters. Ray Harryhausen was born on June 29, 1920 in Los Angeles, California. But his entire life was reshaped the moment he saw Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack's King Kong. It was Willis O'Brien's jaw-dropping stop-motion animation of the film's title monster that would forever change Ray's world. For as long as I can remember, I have always wanted to create, whether drawing or modeling, said Harryhausen. So when I discovered, age 14, the eighth wonder of the world, King Kong, I wanted to direct my skills into making my own Kong, or at least something similar. Luckily, my inherent skills and interests provided the tools which would enable me to follow that path and make my own creations. A young Harryhausen's first attempts at creature creation began in junior high, making string puppet creatures and plays that included a recreation of King Kong. This was followed by making rubber masks for his friends, all while beginning to understand more and more about stop-motion animation. But that took a major step forward in 1938, when he decided to call O'Brien at MGM Studios, where the artist was working on the film War Eagles. O'Brien invited young Ray over and began to teach him about three-dimensional stop-motion animation and the steps needed to bring endless, fantastical creatures to life. From then on, Harryhausen committed himself to the pursuit of a career in stop motion. Ray soon after went to art classes at Manual Arts High School and an art center in Los Angeles to learn how to draw proportional, anatomically correct 2D models. From there, he attended night classes at the University of Southern California to learn film editing, art direction, and photography. But Ray soon joined the Army during World War II and, thanks to his interest in filmmaking, served in the United States Army Special Services Division under director Frank Capra, who by this point had already made classics like It Happened One Night. Under Capra, Harryhausen created effects for the orientation series Why We Fight, and continued to learn on set while still waiting to return to stop motion. Post-World War II, Harryhausen learned sculpture while shooting many different shorts on his own, using 1,000 feet of leftover Kodachrome color film stock from the military. These, like How to Bridge a Gorge or Guadalcanal, were detailed recreations of military activities. Very different from what he'd be known for later, but you can see the passion and raw talent there already, especially for such a complex process with so little technical support. Some of Harryhausen's greatest artistic influences came from outside of film. And I think that's what contributed to so much of his influence on film itself, translating worlds of fantasy and sci-fi into the medium in ways that were never done before. These major inspirations included Gustave Doré, John Martin, Joseph Michael Gandy, Charles Robert Knight, Michelangelo's unfinished stone figures, and the original Tarzan book illustrators. When you look at the art created by these major influences, you not only see the style that shaped Harryhausen's creations, but the subject matter that would define so much of the films he produced and chose to work on. Doré's Inferno drawings, Martin's Sadak in Search of the Waters of Oblivion, Gandy's Jupiter Pluvius, and Knight's many different dinosaur recreations all shaped the ways in which Harryhausen interpreted both real and mythological beasts for the big screen. When combined with his love of King Kong at a young age and the types of creatures that could conceivably be rendered by stop-motion art, you have a filmography primarily focused on fantasy, ancient mythology, long-lost animals, and science fiction. Ray achieved his first big break when O'Brien hired him in 1947 to work on the production of Mighty Joe Young, directed by Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, and written by Ruth Rose as the reforming group's big follow-up to their classic King Kong. And like Kong, Mighty Joe Young centers on a gorilla in trouble, but instead of a massive fantastical ape, it's a much more life-sized and friendly one who still gets into all sorts of life-threatening escapades. And no disrespect to the eighth wonder of the world, but the effects and overall quality of Mighty Joe Young are simply much better than Kong. That's thanks to the many advancements made in models, compositing, and stop-motion filming in the time between. Joe himself is incredibly expressive, has a really dynamic sense of motion in both the film's comedic and dramatic scenes, and has a greater level of interactivity with the world around him. And while Harryhausen is credited as first tech on the film, he was the lead animator, working alongside sound tech Pete Peterson and sculptor Marcel Delgado, as O'Brien was busy being responsible for solving many of the larger technical needs of the film. Overall, Mighty Joe Young isn't in the pantheon of great creature features like Kong, and doesn't hit the massive, emotional, operatic highs of that movie, but I think its big set pieces, like Joe's accidental nightclub rampage or the film's fiery, complete with colored film stock, finale, are incredible thanks to the wild, hyperkinetic animation. It still stands as one of Harryhausen's best works. What makes Mighty Joe Young so impressive is also what makes it unreplicable afterward. The cost and scope of the stop-motion production wasn't something that most studios wanted to pay for in the years that followed. For Joe, O'Brien and company built stop-motion scenery out of multiple layers of glass for a depth of field, a painstaking and expensive process that couldn't be replicated. The rest of Harryhausen's career would need to find a different way forward, with the creator saying, "I knew, when I left Obi's side, that I had to find a way of producing screen adventures in a more practical and affordable manner." Next came 1953's The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the first of many made with producer Charles Schneer, but brought to life through Ray's technical effects work. Here, the Rhedosaurus is our giant monster, frozen in ice for millennia and awoken by nuclear bomb testing. The Rhedosaurus's rampage across Manhattan is cool, but also illustrates the limitations of the time for stop-motion interaction with live action, something that Harryhausen would continue to work on in the decades to come. But I think the nighttime attack on the lighthouse is the best moment of the movie, a moody and scary scene that uses shadows and outlines to emphasize the creature's danger. This general idea is essentially replicated for It Came from Beneath the Sea in 1955, only with a giant octopus instead of a dinosaur. It would have been easy for the film to simply use a real octopus interacting with miniatures, but this stop-motion beast, complete with dozens of suckers and highly textured skin, makes this all so much better, with the attack on the Golden Gate Bridge having some great destruction. There would be plenty of scenes made by Harryhausen over the years that superimpose stop-motion creations with live-action sets and people, but for maximum destruction, Harryhausen and his team would also make miniature sets to create interactions that sold the reality of his many different monsters. Among the many different films he worked on, Harryhausen was the most critical of The Animal World from 1956, where he worked under O'Brien as supervising animator once again. However, the various dinosaur models were made in Warner Brothers' own studios and under the strict control of producer Irwin Allen, whose financial restrictions caused the creations to be dull and rubbery, the antithesis of everything Harryhausen had strived for with his own work. Combined with a mandate to animate as fast and simple as possible, and the film was what he called one of the most unrewarding experiences in my life. And afterward, you can see the artist really worked to maintain control over his creatures. Still, the artist said that his many years working with O'Brien showed him that whatever I imagined, no matter how extraordinary, could be brought to life on screen. It's very easy to only think of Harryhausen in terms of the specific creatures he brought to life through stop motion, but what's crucial to understand, and I think brings a new level of appreciation for the artist, is that everything you see surrounding his creations, as well as scenes of destruction not possible on a set, were also either designed or fully brought to life by the man. Not only are the models made by his hands, but everything around them, their filming, and their interplay with the many human actors of these films are his creations as well. I had to be a carpenter, a metal worker, a mad artist. In fact, an odd job man. I had to master whatever was required to make it all come together. Here is the process of stop-motion animation that Harryhausen followed to make the many different creations we'll see unfold here. First, create key feature drawings to illustrate major scenes of a perspective film, and sketch out concept drawings to bring the vision to the page, and refine over new iterations that align with what's possible on the screen. Many of these are the only records of unmade movies that the artist envisioned. Next, create a still model that brings the object to physical life to nail down its proportions. Outside of and after his work on film, Harryhausen loved to create models, crafting many bronze statues that I think are just incredible works of art on their own. Then create an articulated metal skeleton as the structure for an armature model, which is then covered in latex rubber, sculpted, and painted to be a fully movable model. For most of his career, Harryhausen's most important assistant was his own father, Frederick W. Harryhausen. The elder Harryhausen helped machine the armatures for him for years, a very specialized skill that used a team of technicians at big studios. These armatures served as the strong, durable skeleton to the creatures being made, and while time and hard use has slowly destroyed many of the bodies of Harryhausen's creations, the armatures of many of these have remained intact. Once the skeletons were crafted, the armatures were covered in latex exteriors that Harryhausen did in two different methods during his career. His earliest creations were done in the build-up method, gluing layers of sponge rubber onto the metal armature, and then shaping and contouring the body with scissors. On top of this, cotton wool and more sponge rubber were added to create muscles, and then liquid latex was used to create a thin skin stretched over the muscles and glued on with rubber cement. By 1 million years BC in 1966, Harryhausen had switched entirely to the casting method. Here, the creator would build a wax or a clay model, which was then used to create a plaster mold. The metal armature was then placed in the center of the mold, which was filled with latex and then baked in his kitchen oven, securing the metal skeleton within. This completed model was then cleaned up and painted, as long as the bake didn't go wrong, which Harryhausen said often happened to a frustrating degree. That model is then photographed one frame at a time to simulate life, which is run through a projector to bring it all together in motion. For the modern movie run at 24 frames per second, this means 24 movements and photographs for just a single second of film. With Dynamation, that filming process is even more extensive, with multiple passes on the same frame of film needed to add background, midground, and foreground elements to the same image, extending the length of the filming process by at least threefold. Dynamation was created by Ray during the process of 20,000 Fathoms, and he continued to refine it over the years, painstakingly matting out and filming portions of the frame, and eventually adding complex action sequences that had humans and animation directly interacting. Remember that this was all done in the days before digital video and playback, meaning that our creative team was kinda working blind, only seeing the completed scenes once the film was shipped out, developed, and brought back to watch. When the exposed film stock arrived back from the laboratories after being processed, the excitement of seeing a model move is impossible to imagine. That excitement never left me, even up to the last frame of film on my last feature. Harryhausen also made his own paints in his early years, due to the specifics needed to stick to plastic and rubber without flaking and cracking. The teeth were either plastic models or real teeth, often from dead monkeys, and the eyes were supplied by doll makers or taxidermists. I sometimes wonder if people realize how much effort went into achieving the effect, said Harryhausen, but that is something I often ask myself. What's surprising to learn about Harryhausen's process is that, despite his creations being the centerpieces of so many big-budget films, most of his models were made at his home instead of a studio. The process would slowly change over the years, but our artist's creative process was a decades-long trial-and-error experience, moving from his early short stays post-World War II to eventually having teams big enough and productions with enough moving parts that he needed a team to make the clay models based on his designs. Despite financial constraints, the majority of Harryhausen's career took place at an ideal time for his art. Filmmaking had made enough advancements for his creations to be shot well without a massive budget, while Harryhausen and his fellow creators had enough freedom to choose the stories they wanted to tell and get their films financed and made, so long as they performed well enough at the box office, and few subjects provided as many potential heroes and monsters as mythology. So many of Harryhausen's films are based on myths, because they offered the artist more than enough interesting subjects for his animation. Beyond some early shorts experiments, Jason and the Argonauts in 1963 was his first real dive into bringing Greek myth to life on the big screen. This, combined with his 3 Sinbad films, gave Harryhausen the chance to bring many different fantastical creatures to life, mixing and matching pieces of different well-known stories and moving monsters from one tale over to another to make the story they wanted to see. No real regard for historical accuracy needed. Alongside mythological creatures, dinosaurs were a common subject for Harryhausen's films, with the artist crediting seeing The Lost World and King Kong at a young age, as well as his extensive research into the creatures, as the reason why he returned to them again and again. And while the many different dinosaurs he brought to life don't adhere to modern paleontologists' depictions, they weren't really scientifically accurate back then either, with the sculptor admitting that he happily altered his dinosaurs for a better cinematic look. And then there's the aliens. In each of his sci-fi films, Harryhausen had one goal: make sure his stop-motion extraterrestrials didn't look like men in suits. Of all of these, Ymir from 20 Million Miles to Earth is probably his best remembered, but the artist always dreamed of one day making his own version of War of the Worlds, one of the many unrealized projects that I wish we could have seen. Harryhausen's trajectory as a stop-motion animator is a fascinating blend of constant self-education and on-the-fly decisions. In his autobiographical writings, the animator discusses how much he studied both his art form and various subjects in the time between projects, while also admitting that the scenes he animated often had very little pre-planning, instead coming up with movements and actions during the animation process, looking for inspiration in the midst of the many days and weeks it would take to bring his scenes to life. For a big-budget studio production with a large team, that approach would be disastrous. But so much of Harryhausen's work was done either by himself or with a very small team, and mostly independent of the rest of the project happening at the time. That also means there's sometimes a wide disconnect between the quality of his portions of the film and everything else. Harryhausen's films were directed by a wide variety of people, with Don Chaffee and Nathan Juran the only directors he ever collaborated with multiple times. Often, I would say that these films are fun, but everything that's not part of Harryhausen's effects work is pretty forgettable. We're here for those big crazy monsters, and when they arrive, we wake up. And even when he couldn't fit a design into a film, he'd eventually circle back around to the concept in a later project, determined to get his vision on screen somehow. As the decades go by in Harryhausen's career, you can see his productions lean more and more into mythology to create stories and worlds separated from our own, and primarily make fantastical beasts that have little relation to real-world modern-day animals. But I think there are wonderful gems spread across all of these movies. The giant bronze Talos of Jason and the Argonauts was inspired by the Colossus of Rhodes, and is the sort of enormous enemy that feels ripped straight out of a child's imagination. The vaguely Tyrannosaurus Gwangi, complete with purple hide, is the type of fantasy that forgets scientific accuracy and embraces thrills. The Cyclops of Sinbad is just filled with character, a dangerous menace that is so charming because we really see Harryhausen's imagination and artistry on full display. The skeleton army of Jason and the Argonauts might be his most well-known creation, and they're still really impressive even when you can see the seams of the production. To bring them to life, the skeletons were built on an extra-thin armature, and the appearance of bone created with cotton dipped in latex rubber. No matter the creation, they all sprang from a source of pure passion. I always tried to instill characters into my creations, and to express that character through their movements, said Harryhausen. In order to achieve that, I had to observe how the character of animals and humans was expressed through movement, and then translate those observations into action when I manipulated my models. Jason and the Argonauts was a box office disappointment when it was released, but over the next 20 years, it became a cult hit, giving Harryhausen and crew the cachet they needed to return to Greek mythology. The resulting film, Clash of the Titans, has more input into its design from others than most of Harryhausen's other films, but it also has his fingerprints over more of it than anything else, with the artist storyboarding every sequence in the movie, whether or not it featured stop motion. This is why I think Clash of the Titans, Ray's final film, is really his greatest achievement. Every element of the film, from production design to music, is trying to be on the same level as his visual effects. And the film is loaded from front to back with his creations, with a total of 8 different creatures, tied with 1 million years BC for the most he made for a single movie. These are some of his most iconic creations. Medusa and the Kraken are some of my all-time favorite movie monsters, with Medusa as this small-scale, intimate threat that really did scare me as a kid. The way she slithers and attacks is uncanny in a great way, with Perseus using his gifts and wit to survive as his companions die one by one. And the Kraken, Harryhausen's final on-screen monster, is a towering threat that is just so freaking cool. A Greek kaiju? What's better than that? It's also much creepier than most of his past films, with creatures like Calibos, whose shadowed transformation wigged me out as a kid, and wide-shot stop-motion life undermine the horror of the character. When it comes to the strengths and weaknesses of not just his output, but the general capabilities of stop-motion animation of the time, human beings were always the least impressive models. Most of the time, these were only used when absolutely necessary, such as a human character being picked up and thrashed around by a stop-motion monster. Of course, close-up shots can help fudge the interactions between live man and animated monster. But in wide shots designed to illustrate the full movement of the monster, you absolutely need a stop-motion stand-in for a real actor, so he or she can be flung around or even torn apart by a furious beast. If there's any weakness to Harryhausen's films, it's that the rest of the films surrounding Harryhausen's set pieces often don't live up to the inventiveness or excitement that the stop-motion animator brought to life. Most of these films aren't mega-budgeted productions, but instead are moderately priced films attempting to take on a massive scope and a world of fantasy, sci-fi, or the distant past. Harryhausen's visual effects are what made so much of that possible, creating beasts and moments that wouldn't work using physical props, costumes, or animatronics. But that's also kind of the charm of so many of these movies. It's no surprise that many of the filmmakers that were inspired by Harryhausen's creations first watched them as kids. There's something about the visibly handmade quality of his effects that makes us understand, even from an early age, that what we're seeing is the product of an artist, and something that, while maybe not to the same degree of quality or imagination, is replicable by anybody at home with some clay, a camera, and a little time. Steven Spielberg, Peter Jackson, George Lucas, James Cameron, Guillermo del Toro, and many more have all cited Harryhausen's filmography as helping to inspire them to become filmmakers. When Jurassic Park was in development, a production that actually shifted from stop-motion animation to CGI during its pre-production, Spielberg invited his inspiration to see the first ever CGI dinosaurs, while they were still only skeleton renders, saying, Harryhausen embraced it immediately as a positive. He wasn't sad to see the paradigm shift. He was as jubilant as you can imagine a young boy would be. I saw the child in him at that moment, which was, for me, one of the greatest moments of my life. Looking into his eyes as he was watching what Dennis Muren had created. Many pieces of modern media have been directly inspired by Harryhausen's films as well, directly homaging or maybe not even existing if it weren't for them. The original Star Wars trilogy employed stop motion for its most titanic crafts and beasts. Sony's original God of War trilogy is pulling so much inspiration from Clash of the Titans. Army of Darkness has a tongue-in-cheek approach to the stop-motion skeletons of Argonauts, complete with Sam Raimi putting Bruce Campbell through the grueling paces of Dynamation. And of course, there's the remakes. But with the modern Mighty Joe Young and Clash of the Titans using CGI, there's just something charming missing. Those films were made to showcase stop motion. Without it, there's no real reason for them to exist. Clash of the Titans from 1981 would be Harryhausen's last film. Despite plans for many more movies, like the spiritual Clash follow-up Force of the Trojans, or the insane-sounding Sinbad Goes to Mars, he would be forced to retire at the age of 61, when modern film production began inventing new ways of creating visual effects that didn't demand the same level of time and labor as stop motion. Over the following 3 decades, the artist would devote his time to the preservation and restoration of many of his most famous creations, with the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation alongside his wife, helping to support the arts, even beyond his passing on May 7, 2013, at the age of 92. The life and career of Ray Harryhausen is a wonderful, inspiring testament to the determination and imagination needed to make genre-defining art. Not just determination to pursue the education and training needed to turn a dream into a career, but the determination constantly needed every day in that career. To truly know how much work that actually took is to have your outlook on film changed forever. And for anyone that saw his creations at a formative age, Ray Harryhausen will always be a titan of cinema. Thanks for watching today's video, and I absolutely love talking about Ray Harryhausen. From an early age, movies like Clash of the Titans and Jason and the Argonauts captured my imagination, seeing so many snippets of these so often when I was young. Sometimes they freaked me out, and sometimes they really awestruck me. But in either case, I knew that I was watching something really special. And as the years went by, I learned more and more about the man that was Ray Harryhausen. And in preparation for this video, I've been watching a lot of his movies over the last 6 months, as well as reading several fantastic books that gave me so much more appreciation for his process. So if you're interested, I absolutely recommend these books. Those are An Animated Life by Ray Harryhausen, The Art of Ray Harryhausen by Harryhausen and Tony Dalton, and Ray Harryhausen, Titan of Cinema by his daughter, Vanessa Harryhausen. All of those are absolutely worth your time and give so many more interesting details about his life. Titan of Cinema in particular is a really sweet book, so go check that out, even if you're a casual fan. Personally, Clash of the Titans is my favorite Harryhausen movie, but it's hard to beat Mighty Joe Young, because that is a really just fantastically animated film. 1,000,000 Years BC and Jason and the Argonauts are also a lot of fun, but I really highly recommend watching any of the movies he worked on if this video made you interested in his career. He was absolutely one of a kind and a total inspiration for generations of filmmakers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Ray Harryhausen, as well as your favorite movies that he worked on. If you caught any of them at the right age, I think they are absolutely unforgettable. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons for their continued support. And if you'd like to be a patron, it's only $1 a month for early access to every video, as well as Patreon-only exclusive reviews. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and getting swept away by the art of Ray Harryhausen.